The rain had been falling for hours. Thick, cold sheets sliced through the empty streets like blades of glass. Officer Kelly Monroe was locking up for the night at the Cedar Grove Police Department's front desk when she saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow moving oddly across the street, limping under the flickering streetlight. Then lightning struck and she froze. It was a German shepherd, soaked, bleeding, barely standing. Its chest heaved with exhaustion as it dragged itself toward the station door, gripping something in its mouth. A backpack. Kelly rushed to the door and flung it open. The dog collapsed at her feet, the muddy backpack hitting the ground with a wet slap. Then she heard it, a cry, soft, weak, almost drowned out by the storm. A baby's cry. That moment shattered the routine stillness of the small town station. Within seconds, the night crew was swarming, guns drawn, unsure what they were dealing with. But Kelly already knew. This wasn't just an injured stray. This dog had brought them something no one was prepared to see. They named him Ryder because the tag on his collar was too rusted to read anything else. But the tag wasn't the important part. What mattered was what was inside the bag. Inside the soaked, dirt-covered backpack was a tiny infant girl, no more than 3 months old. Her body was cold, her skin pale, but her chest was rising, barely wrapped in a thin towel. Her tiny fists clenched as if, even in unconsciousness, she was fighting. One of the younger officers, Gina, dropped to her knees and gasped, tears already pooling. "Oh my God, she's alive! She's alive!" Lieutenant Harris barked orders. "Get the medic team here now. Warm blankets, oxygen, go." As chaos unfolded, Ryder didn't move. He just lay there, his eyes dull but alert, still watching the baby, still guarding her. They didn't realize it yet, but this dog had just saved a life and unearthed a mystery no one in Cedar Grove was ready to face. Earlier that week, Ryder had been reported missing. He wasn't some street dog. He was a retired K-9 from a nearby precinct, formerly assigned to Officer Thomas Burke, who'd left the force after a back injury. Since then, Burke lived alone in a cabin deep in the woods north of town. Quiet man, former war vet, no wife, no kids, just Ryder. The two had been seen walking the trails every morning. Ryder always stayed close, obedient, eyes scanning like he never left the job. So when Burke called 3 days ago, saying Ryder had escaped through a broken fence and hadn't come back, no one thought much of it. Probably chasing deer, someone joked. Dog's old, he'll come back. But Ryder didn't come back. Not until that night, and not without a message. They rushed the baby to the nearest hospital, where nurses wrapped her in warm blankets and tubes. She had mild hypothermia and signs of malnutrition. Doctors said if she'd been found just an hour later, she probably wouldn't have survived. But she did, and that left a chilling question. Where did Ryder find her? And more importantly, who left her out there to die? Back at the station, as dawn broke, the rain finally slowed. Ryder lay on a blanket in the corner of the bullpen, sedated and stitched. Officers moved around him like a fallen hero. His front paw was broken, ribs cracked, a gash on his side, needed 12 stitches. Every injury told a silent story. This wasn't an accidental rescue. This was a mission, and he had finished it. At this point in the story, if you're as moved as we were by Ryder's courage, please consider subscribing to Heroes for Animals. We share real stories of loyalty, sacrifice, and the bond between animals and people. Stories like this one that deserve to be remembered and told. Officer Monroe couldn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about how the baby had been placed into that backpack gently, as if by someone who still cared, even as they walked away. The towel was wrapped carefully. There was even a small pacifier tucked into a side pocket. Someone didn't want the baby to die, but someone still left her to die. And Ryder, how did he even find her? By the next morning, Child Services were on the scene. They named the baby Hope. No ID, no birth certificate. No one had reported a missing child matching her description. But Ryder kept trying to stand. Every time he smelled someone new enter the room, he'd perk up, try to move, whine, almost like he was looking for someone. 3 days later, things got even stranger. Officer Gina, the same one who cried holding the baby, had a hunch. She went through the station logs, cross-referenced missing persons. One name popped up. Maria Gonzalez, age 16, reported missing 4 months ago. At the time, it hadn't made the news. Small town, troubled kid. Maria had been living with a distant uncle after being kicked out by her mother. No real friends, no phone. Her school counselor said she'd been withdrawn and possibly pregnant. But without solid evidence, the case went cold. Now, looking at baby Hope, olive-toned skin, curly black hair, around 3 months old, it wasn't a stretch to imagine she could be Maria's child. They reopened the file, and what they found next changed the story completely. Maria had been in Cedar Grove 3 months ago, and Officer Thomas Burke, Ryder's owner, was listed in her last known contacts. He'd been volunteering at a food pantry downtown. Maria had come in 3 times. Each time, she spoke with him privately. Witnesses said he seemed protective of her. That was enough for Monroe to drive out to Burke's cabin. And what she saw there, well, we'll get to that in part 2. But let's just say Ryder wasn't running away. He was running towards something buried, something that barked at him every night in his dreams. And when no one else listened, he acted. Lieutenant Monroe had driven that dirt road dozens of times. Hunters used it. Hikers. Local teens looking to drink where no one would bother them. But this morning, the road felt different. It felt like a secret was waiting. The trees closed in tighter the farther she went. Pines, tall and dark, dripped with last night's rain. Mud caked the tires of her cruiser. Fog clung to the windshield. The GPS blinked out a quarter mile before the destination. Not unusual. Thomas Burke had always been the type to live off the grid. But now, with what they'd learned, Monroe's got twisted. She parked at the edge of the tree line and stepped out, boots sinking into soft earth. The cabin sat silent, old, weather-worn, porch light still flickering, smoke curling from a chimney, which meant someone was home or had been recently. She placed her hand on the grip of her holstered sidearm and stepped forward. Thomas Burke didn't answer the first knock. Monroe waited, then knocked again, this time louder. "Officer Monroe, Cedar Grove PD. Thomas, I need to speak with you." A pause, then a slow creak. The door opened a crack, and Burke's face appeared in the sliver. Tired eyes, graying beard, a faded hoodie. He didn't look surprised. "You found the baby," he said flatly. Monroe blinked. "Yes, we did. Ryder brought her to us. She's alive in the hospital now." A beat of silence passed between them. Then Burke opened the door all the way and stepped aside. "You should come in." Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar, smoke, coffee, and something else Monroe couldn't place. Something faintly metallic, almost like rust. The place was clean, almost obsessively so. Books lined the walls, military medals on a shelf, a folded American flag in a triangular case above the fireplace. Burke gestured toward a wooden chair. He remained standing. "You're not here for coffee." Monroe sat, her eyes never leaving his. "Tell me about Maria Gonzalez." Burke's shoulders tightened. He looked away toward the window. "I didn't hurt her," he said. "I tried to help. She was here." He nodded slowly. "She came to me, told me she had nowhere else to go. She was scared, said she was pregnant, said her uncle wasn't safe." Monroe's stomach turned. She kept her voice level. "Why didn't you call us?" "She begged me not to. Said she'd run if I did. Said she trusted me because Ryder was good to her." That name again, the dog. Always the dog. The only one who saw what others didn't. Burke continued. "She stayed here. I gave her the spare room, brought her food. I taught her how to take care of herself, how to breathe through the contractions when they started." "Where is she now?" Monroe asked. He didn't answer. "Thomas, I'm asking you directly. Where's Maria?" His eyes dropped to the floor. "She didn't make it." Monroe's breath caught. "She died during labor." Burke nodded. "It happened fast. I didn't know what to do. I tried CPR. She lost too much blood. She was gone before I could even get to the truck." "And you didn't report it?" "I panicked," he said. "I buried her behind the cabin." Monroe stood, fury rising in her chest. "You hid the death of a minor girl, who was under your care. You hit a child. That baby could have died. Thomas. She almost did. Burke said nothing. His hands trembled. She asked me to protect her daughter, he whispered. She said her name would be Hope. Said if anything happened, I should make sure she got to someone safe, but I didn't think I could do it. So Ryder did. Burke nodded. He wouldn't leave the crawl space. Every night, he stood there whining. I finally opened it. He pulled the bag out himself, like he knew, like he remembered a promise his human couldn't keep. Later that afternoon, Monroe stood at the back of property, facing a mound of earth barely hidden beneath leaves and stones. A makeshift cross stood crooked in the soil. No name, no date, just a memory someone tried to bury. They exhumed the body under the supervision of forensics. The medical examiner confirmed the remains were consistent with a teenage female who had recently given birth. DNA results later confirmed what Monroe already knew. Maria was the mother of the infant girl found in Ryder's bag. The story spread fast. The baby, the dog, the silence, and the man who let fear win until a dog stepped in. Thomas Burke was taken into custody without incident. The charges were still being debated. Failure to report a death, unlawful burial, endangerment of a child. He didn't fight, didn't plead, just sat in the back of the patrol car, staring out the window at the fading pines. Ryder, meanwhile, was hailed as a hero. His photo made the front page of the Cedar Grove Gazette. He was featured on local news. Donations poured into the shelter that had helped care for him post-surgery. But none of that changed the truth. He had done what no one else did. He had listened. Hope, officially Isabella Hope Gonzalez, was placed in emergency foster care while the state sorted out her future. The nurse who first fed her at the hospital requested to adopt her. I can't explain it, she told the caseworker. But when I looked into her eyes, I felt like she'd been through a war she didn't remember. But Ryder did. Officer Monroe visited Ryder 1 week later. He was staying with Gina, the young officer who had wept holding the baby. Ryder limped out to meet Monroe, tail thumping weakly. She knelt beside him, rubbing his ears. You found her, she whispered, and you brought her back. We should have listened to you sooner. He looked up at her, eyes full of something ancient, something loyal. Then he laid his head in her lap and closed his eyes. Sometimes it's not about barks or sirens, not about medals or arrests. Sometimes justice comes in the form of a wounded dog dragging a soaked backpack through the rain. Because love doesn't always come with words. Sometimes it comes with teeth marks on the zipper, broken ribs, and the will to crawl back to those who still care. The story of the wounded dog and the baby in the backpack had gone viral by the end of the week. Small-town Cedar Grove had suddenly become the epicenter of national headlines. K-9 hero saves abandoned infant. Dog carries storm-exposed hidden death. If not for Ryder, no one would have known. It was the kind of story that hit America right in the heart. Part tragedy, part miracle, part mystery. But what most people didn't know, what still hadn't come out publicly, was that Ryder had been trying to tell someone something for weeks. Officer Gina Morales knew it better than anyone. She'd been the first to hold baby Hope when they unzipped the muddy backpack. She was also the first one Ryder let near after surgery. And now, every evening after her shift, she sat with him quietly, patiently, watching the way his ears twitched when someone said the name Maria. Ryder would get up, walk to the door, wait every time. It was like he was expecting her to walk back in, but she never would. The district attorney issued a public statement clarifying charges against Thomas Burke. There would be no homicide indictment. Medical records confirmed Maria had died of hemorrhage during childbirth. But Burke was facing multiple felony charges: unlawful disposal of a body, child endangerment, obstruction of justice. Still, many in the town were divided. Some called Burke a coward. Others said he was just a broken man who didn't know what to do. But no one could deny one thing. It was Ryder, not Thomas, who had chosen action, who had left the cabin, injured and alone, to find help, to deliver a baby, and maybe to deliver the truth. What no one had pieced together yet was that this wasn't just about Maria or the baby. There was more buried in those woods than a shallow grave. It was mid-March when the first clue emerged. A local hunter named Greg Taylor came into the station with something strange. He'd been hiking along the northern ridge near Thomas Burke's cabin, looking for game trails, when his dog sniffed out an old piece of fabric sticking out of ground. It looked like a tarp, he told Monroe. But when I pulled it, it was heavy, like weighed down. Inside the tarp was a bundle of soiled clothes, a disposable phone, and a torn plastic grocery bag with medical gloves, wipes, and blood. It was dried, old, but it was there. Monroe's team cordoned off the area and brought in search dogs. Ryder, still recovering, had been cleared for limited outdoor movement. And when Gina brought him to the site, something changed. He froze, then slowly, limping, began to walk toward a patch of trees about 30 feet away. He sat, looked back, then started pawing at the earth. They dug for 3 hours before finding what Ryder had sensed. Another shallow grave, but this time it wasn't a body. It was a box, a small wooden chest. Inside, photographs, letters, and a notebook wrapped in plastic. The letters were from Maria. The notebook was hers, too. She had been keeping a journal the entire time she stayed with Thomas. And in those pages was a story no one expected. Maria had known she was pregnant before coming to Cedar Grove. She had run from more than just an abusive uncle. She had been part of a group home in another town, one with a long list of complaints and no real oversight. She wrote about fear, about being followed, about a man she'd seen speaking to her caseworker one night, the same man who appeared later at the food pantry asking about her. Thomas hadn't just offered her a place to stay. He had promised her safety, but she had never fully trusted him. In one entry, dated 3 days before she gave birth, she wrote, "Ryder is the only one I believe. He sleeps in front of the room door. He barks if Thomas comes in when I'm not awake. I think he's trying to protect me from something even I don't understand." The entries stopped the day before she went into labor. Monroe read the entire notebook 3 times. Her chest grew tight with every page. She began digging through old reports, group home complaints, missing teen files, anonymous abuse tips that had never been followed up, and she found something chilling. One name kept coming up, Thomas Burke. He'd been listed as a community volunteer on multiple caseworker reports, never formally accused of anything, but mentioned often enough to raise suspicion. How had no one noticed? And why had he targeted Maria? The answers came slowly and painfully. Phone records showed that Burke had called the home's director twice in the month before Maria disappeared. He said he was checking on a young girl who had no family. But what followed was even worse. When the director was questioned, he admitted under pressure that he had looked the other way when Burke took Maria in. She seemed better off with him, the man said, avoiding Monroe's eyes. "And the baby?" she asked. He said nothing. Monroe stood up in the interrogation room and walked straight to Ryder's kennel. He was resting, head on his paws, but when she entered, his tail moved once. She sat down beside him. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew he wasn't who he said he was, and you stayed anyway. You watched her, protected her, and when she was gone, you took it on yourself." She placed her badge on the floor beside him. "Guess we got the badge on the wrong one all along." The next day, Monroe made a decision to reopen not just Maria's case, but 6 other missing teen files from counties surrounding Cedar Grove. Every single one had ties to the same group home, and everyone had, at some point, interacted with Thomas Burke through volunteer services or church functions. The truth was darker than anyone had imagined. Maria hadn't just been abandoned. She had been hidden, her voice silenced, her baby nearly erased. But Ryder didn't let that happen. Baby Hope remained in the care of Nurse Diane, who had filed for legal adoption. CPS announced that she would be granted full guardianship pending the background check, which she passed with ease. Ryder, now fully healed, was scheduled to receive a national award for animal heroism, but he didn't care about medals. He only perked up when Diane brought Baby Hope to visit the station, the moment she was placed on a blanket beside him. He inched closer and gently nudged her with his nose. She giggled. He licked her cheek. It was the first time he wagged his tail since everything happened. Cedar Grove changed after that. People started asking more questions, looking deeper, listening better. And when a child cried or a girl went quiet or a dog barked when something felt wrong, People paid attention because Ryder had taught them that instincts matter, that loyalty sees through lies, and that sometimes a hero doesn't carry a gun or wear a uniform. Sometimes he just carries a backpack through the rain, bleeding, and won't stop until someone listens. The spring thaw came late to Cedar Grove that year. Most mornings were still wrapped in frost. Trees stood bare and stiff like sentinels. But for Lieutenant Monroe, every sunrise brought new movement, new leads, new names, and new ghosts crawling out from places no one had thought to look. What started with Ryder had turned into something much bigger. 7 reopened missing teen files, 2 search warrants, 1 broken silence, and underneath it all, a retired K-9 who refused to stay silent. They called it Phase 2 at the precinct. The investigation now stretched beyond Cedar Grove. Monroe and her team were in contact with 3 other counties, all coordinating a deep dive into group home systems, former social workers, and clerical staff. It was tedious, often thankless work. Paper trails, archived voicemails, dusty boxes of handwritten reports. But then something strange happened. 2 of the group homes they were investigating abruptly closed. One cited financial reasons. The other claimed they were relocating. Both happened within the same week. Too convenient. Monroe knew something wasn't right, and Ryder knew it, too. It had been nearly a month since baby Hope was found. She was growing stronger, heavier, starting to smile, though never for long. Diane, her foster nurse, said she often woke up crying in the early hours, as if from a dream she couldn't remember. One morning, Ryder was lying beside her crib. She reached a tiny hand through the bars and grabbed his ear. He didn't flinch, just let her hold on, gently lifting his head to nuzzle her hand. She only sleeps when he's near, Diane told Monroe one day. It's like she feels safe with him, like she remembers something he did for her. Monroe nodded. She does. She just doesn't have the words for it yet. On a hunch, Monroe returned to Burke's cabin, this time with a warrant and a forensic team. The grave behind the house had already been cleared, but there were still areas of the property that hadn't been touched, especially the basement. She remembered what Ryder had done before, how he scratched at floorboards, how he tried to lead them somewhere. So, when they opened the old trap door to the cellar beneath the cabin, Ryder followed without hesitation. And as soon as his paws hit the concrete, he turned left toward a side wall that looked solid, but he began to whine. Monroe leaned in, examining the baseboard. It had a faint discoloration, just a few inches of it. When she tapped it with her flashlight, it sounded hollow. Get me the thermal scanner. They found a hidden compartment within minutes. A false wall, behind which was a small, windowless room. Inside, a mattress, a bucket, a set of worn blankets, half-eaten food, old children's books, a broken baby monitor, and in one corner, scratched into the plaster, tiny marks, dozens of them, tally marks. Someone had been keeping track of days. No one had known that room existed, not even the county assessor. It wasn't listed on the blueprint. The construction looked recent, at least within the last 2 years. But that wasn't the worst part. In a dusty wooden box by the door, sealed in a Ziploc bag, they found more letters. Letters written by other girls. Some dated back over a year. One included a photo of a different infant, one no one recognized. The words were heartbreaking. If you find this, please tell my mom I didn't leave her. He said he'd help me. He lied. I don't know what day it is. I'm scared. Monroe stepped out of the room, heart pounding. She radioed the station. Get a team ready. We're now investigating this property as a confirmed site of illegal detainment and possible trafficking activity. Notify the federal task force. The media exploded. What started as a story about a heroic dog had now become a full-blown criminal investigation into a multi-county failure of the system. Interviews, press conferences, advocacy groups, protests. It was chaos, but it was necessary chaos. People needed to know, and more importantly, people needed to start caring. Meanwhile, Ryder's fame grew, but Monroe made sure the real story didn't get buried beneath the headlines. At one press conference, when a reporter asked what made the dog so special, Monroe looked straight into the camera. It's not just that he carried a baby to safety. It's that he never gave up. He barked, scratched, limped, crawled, whatever it took. Ryder didn't just save hope. He made us see everything we were missing. He forced us to listen. Not long after the discovery at the cabin, Monroe was contacted by a young woman named Elena Torres. She was 21 now, but at 16, she'd been part of the same group home where Maria had once lived. She asked to speak privately. They met at a diner just off Route 6. Monroe came alone. Ryder sat beside her booth, calm, alert. Elena looked at the dog, then back at Monroe. "I remember him," she said. "That dog. I saw him once. It was outside the pantry. I was with Maria." "You knew her?" "She was my roommate. We were close." Monroe leaned in. "Did she ever tell you anything about Burke?" "She didn't have to," Elena said. "We all knew something was off. The way he looked at the girls. The way the staff let him take people out without questions." She swallowed hard. "I was supposed to go with him once, but I faked being sick. Maria went instead." Silence settled between them. "I still hear her sometimes," Elena whispered. "In my dreams, telling me to tell the truth." Ryder let out a soft whine, and Monroe knew that truth was finally starting to come out. Burke's trial was scheduled for fall. The DA added new charges: kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, multiple counts of child exploitation. More survivors stepped forward, emboldened by the story of Maria and Ryder and baby Hope. What once had been whispers in the system were now loud, undeniable truths. As for Ryder, Monroe made a decision. One evening, she walked into Diane's home with a folder in hand. "What's that?" Diane asked, bouncing baby Hope on her knee. "Adoption papers," Monroe said. Diane raised an eyebrow. "For Hope?" Monroe shook her head. "For Ryder?" Diane blinked. "You're serious?" "I am, but not for me. For you." Diane looked down at the baby, then at the dog who lay curled beside her bassinet. "I thought he already belonged to someone." Monroe smiled. "He does now." The paperwork went through quickly. Local law enforcement pulled strings. Senators tweeted support. And just like that, Ryder, former K-9 survivor, rescuer, was officially adopted into the same home as the baby he saved. The same girl who had clung to life in a cold backpack in the middle of a thunderstorm. Now she reached for him every morning, and he never left her side. Hope's first birthday was quiet. Just Diane, a few friends, some cupcakes, and a dog who sat proudly by the high chair, as if standing guard over something sacred. No one mentioned the past. But they didn't have to. It lived in the scars, in the newspaper clippings on the fridge, in the small tattoo Monroe had gotten on her wrist, a paw print with the word Hope beneath it, and in the new plaque at the entrance of Cedar Grove Police Department in honor of Ryder, K-9 hero, guardian of the innocent, the dog who made us listen. Summer came to Cedar Grove slowly that year. The trees returned to life one leaf at a time. Porch swings creaked again. Kids rode bikes through neighborhoods where the sidewalk still remembered what had happened. In most places, time has a way of healing quietly. But not here. Not yet. Because in Cedar Grove, there were still questions about Maria, about Burke, about how many more were still out there, unfound, unheard, unloved. But one question had already been answered. What does a hero look like? A four-legged shadow with tired eyes, a silver muzzle, and a heart that refused to give up. Ryder adjusted quickly to his new home with Diane and baby Hope. By the second week, he was following her everywhere like a second heartbeat. When she cried, he stood alert beside her crib. When she slept, he lay at the foot of her rocker. And when she giggled, those rare squeaky sounds full of life, he lifted his head and wagged his tail softly. It wasn't just attachment. It was purpose. Diane swore he could sense her dreams. "He gets up a few seconds before she wakes," she said once to Officer Gina. "Like he knows, like he's been watching over her in ways we can't." The trial of Thomas Burke began in early July. Cameras crowded outside the courthouse. Protesters held signs. "Justice for Maria. Believe survivors. End the silence." Inside, the room was cold and still. Maria's journal entries were introduced as evidence. So were the letters, the photos, and the items found in the hidden basement room. Burke didn't speak much. His lawyer leaned hard on the claim that Maria's death had been natural, unpreventable, that he had tried to help her, that he panicked. But the prosecution had a different story. And this time, Maria told it through every page she'd written, every word scratched into the margins. They read her final entry aloud in court. Think the baby will come soon. I'm scared, but I feel okay when Ryder is near. He sleeps with his head by my belly. I think he knows. I hope one day someone reads this and knows I tried. Monroe sat in the back row of the courtroom, her jaw clenched, her fingers pressed into her knees. She wasn't there as an officer anymore. She was there as a witness to what silence can do. 3 days into the trial, a new witness emerged. A girl named Natalie Simmons, now 19, had watched the story unfold from a distance. But when she heard Maria's journal read aloud, she couldn't stay silent. She came forward with her own story. When she was 15, she had been placed at the same group home. Burke had visited as a mentor. He was trusted, friendly, offered rides to girls who needed air. Natalie had gone with him twice. The first time, nothing happened. The second, she was dropped off miles from town and told to think carefully about who she talked to. She reported it. The home dismissed it. You must have misunderstood him, they said. She never spoke about it again until now. Her testimony cracked the courtroom open. Now it wasn't just Maria. It was a pattern. Burke was found guilty on all charges. The judge gave the maximum sentence, 72 years without the possibility of parole. Still, no one cheered. There were no high fives, no victory music. Because justice, while necessary, doesn't undo grief. It doesn't bring the girl back. It doesn't erase the fear from a baby's first few months of life. But it does plant something, a seed of truth, a chance for healing, a place to begin again. That fall, Monroe received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just her name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a photograph, old, creased. It showed Maria smiling faintly, holding a puppy, the same puppy that would grow into Ryder. On the back, a message. She found him before he found her. Maybe that's how it always works. Monroe sat with a photo in her lap for a long time. She didn't know who had sent it, but she did know what it meant. This hadn't started with a baby in a backpack. It started long before that, with a girl, a dog, and a silent bond no one else could see. Diane eventually hung the photo in the nursery. She added it to a wall now filled with pictures. Hope's first smile, her first crawl, her first birthday. In every photo, Ryder appeared. Never in the center, never posed, just there, a quiet witness, a constant. One night, as autumn settled in and the air turned crisp, Diane rocked Hope on the front porch while Ryder lay curled nearby. The stars were out, clear and cold. Hope was sleepy. Her head leaned against Diane's chest. I wish I could tell you everything, Diane whispered. I wish I could tell you who your mother was, what she dreamed about, what her voice sounded like. She glanced down at Ryder. But maybe you already know. Maybe he told you in his own way. Hope stirred and let out a little sigh, the kind that says, I'm home. Officer Gina Morales transferred to a child protection unit in the city 6 months later. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. She wanted to be where she could prevent the next Maria, the next unheard girl. Before she left, she visited Diane's home one last time. Hope reached for her. Ryder licked her hand. You changed my life, Gina whispered to him. Both of you did. She left with tears in her eyes and a new badge in her pocket. Back in Cedar Grove, Monroe was promoted to captain at her swearing-in. She gave a short speech, not about crime rates or policy, but about listening, about how sometimes the ones who can't speak are the ones we most need to hear. She ended with a quote from an anonymous letter she received. In a world full of noise, Ryder heard what no one else did. He didn't bark for attention. He barked for truth. The following spring, the town unveiled a memorial at City Park. A bronze sculpture of a German shepherd standing tall, a small backpack in his mouth. Next to it, a plaque that read, to those who listen when it mattered, to the voiceless, the lost, the brave, and the dog who carried them home. Hope attended the ceremony in a white dress, holding Diane's hand. When she saw the statue, she broke free and ran to it, hugging the bronze paw. The crowd went still. Even Ryder, older now, slower, stood at attention beside her. And in that moment, it didn't matter who remembered the story or who had shared it. What mattered was who had lived it. Maria was never forgotten. Her name was engraved beneath the statue. But so was Ryder's, not as a pet, as a partner, as a voice, as a reason the silence finally broke. By the time Hope turned 5, Cedar Grove had changed. The old group home on Birch Lane was gone, torn down to its foundations. In its place stood a new building, a crisis center for at-risk youth named the Hope House, funded by state grants and local donations. The front lobby held a mural of a little girl in a white dress holding hands with a dog under a stormy sky. It didn't take much to know who inspired it. Hope never remembered the storm. Not really. She had flashes, shadows, voices, the sound of breathing that wasn't human. But when people asked her about the dog, her face would light up. She didn't need memories. She had Ryder. By the time she entered kindergarten, Ryder was slowing down. The stairs took more time. The walks were shorter. The silver on his muzzle had deepened, and his hips sometimes ached on cold mornings. But he never once missed a bedtime. He'd wait for her by the window each afternoon, tail thumping slowly as she ran up the steps. One evening, after reading her a picture book under the soft glow of the hallway light, Diane watched Ryder nudge the blanket over Hope's chest. Then he lay down with a sigh, like he knew his job was nearly done. The morning Ryder passed. It was quiet. No storm, no rain, just a gentle breeze of spring and the soft hush of the world catching its breath. Diane found him curled by the crib, head on his paws, peaceful. Hope stood beside her, not crying, just staring. Then she did something Diane never forgot. She reached down, kissed Ryder on the head, and whispered, "Thank you," then walked to a window and opened the curtain, letting in the light. The town held a memorial 2 weeks later. It wasn't flashy, just a small ceremony in the park under the statue that now bore even more flowers than ever before. People brought candles, toys, cards. Someone placed a leash beside the bronze paw. Someone else tied a child's sock to the backpack. One boy stood quietly, holding his dad's hand, whispering, "That's the dog that saved the baby." And for once, there were no reporters, no headlines, just gratitude, real, honest, human. Diane had Ryder cremated. His ashes were kept in a cedar box beneath the mural of Hope House, where hundreds of kids passed every year. Some broken, some scared, some silent. And every one of them knew his name. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a symbol, a guardian, a story they told when kids asked, "Can anyone really care about someone like me?" "Yes," the staff would say. Someone once did, even when no one else listened. Hope grew up with that story. She carried it quietly, never bragging, never leaning on it, just knowing she had survived, knowing someone had loved her enough to crawl, bleeding, through the night, knowing that her mother, though young, scared, and alone, had tried to give her a future. She asked about Maria often. Was she nice? Did she sing? Diane would answer as best she could. She was brave. She wrote stories. She loved you more than anything. Sometimes Hope would draw pictures of her, always with long dark hair and a dog beside her. A family reunited in crayon. Years passed. Hope turned 9, then 10. She spoke at her 5th grade graduation. The class theme was courage, and she brought a photo of Ryder to the podium. "My dog didn't just protect me," she said. "He showed people that even if you can't speak, you can still be heard." The crowd went quiet. A few teachers cried. Diane watched from the 3rd row, tissues balled in her hands. On the 10th anniversary of Maria's death, Cedar Grove hosted a candlelight vigil. Hundreds gathered. Monroe, now retired from the force, returned to speak. Her hair had gone silver. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice held steady. "We are here," she said, "because a young girl dared to trust, because a dog refused to quit, because silence doesn't have to be permanent." She looked at Hope, now a young teenager, standing proudly with Diane. And because this story, this life, reminds us all what love looks like when words aren't enough. That same night, Hope asked Diane a question she hadn't heard before. Do you think Ryder knew who I'd become? Diane paused. I think Ryder knew exactly who you were the moment he laid his head on your belly. Hope smiled softly. I miss him. I do, too. By age 16, Hope was volunteering at the Hope House. She led reading circles, helped kids through intake, sat with children who had lost more than they could say. And she always brought something with her. Ryder's old collar, now polished and mounted in a shadow box. She never told the full story. She didn't need to. They felt it in how she listened, how she knelt to a child's level, how she said, I'm here, you're safe, the way Ryder had. On what would have been Ryder's 15th birthday, Diane gave Hope a box. Inside was a single envelope. Found it cleaning out the attic. Diane said, I think Monroe left it years ago and never mentioned. Curious. Hope opened it. Inside, a photo of Maria holding Ryder as a pup, one of the originals from the courthouse exhibit, and a note. For Hope, so you know what love looked like before you could see it. M. Hope pressed a photo to her chest and didn't speak for a long time. She eventually went on to become a social worker, not because of obligation, but because of memory, because Ryder had once carried her into the arms of a future, and she wanted to do the same for someone, somewhere, someday. Her first day on the job, she brought a small frame quote and placed it on her desk. It read, sometimes the loudest cry for help comes with no sound at all. So here's where the story ends. Not with fanfare or flashbulbs, but with a legacy. A girl who was left behind but never forgotten. A mother who wrote her truth in the margins of a notebook. A man who broke the law but not the bond between a child and her guardian. A community that listened, and a dog who didn't need words to speak volumes. Ryder never made the evening news again. But his story lived on in whispers, in bedtime tales, in classrooms, in quiet corners of shelters across the country. And maybe, just maybe, he sparked a few more ears to listen when no one else would. Thank you for following this story, for walking alongside Ryder, Maria, Hope, and everyone whose life was touched by one moment of courage in a storm. Before you go, we'd like to ask, when was the last time you truly listened? Not with your ears, but with your heart. Let us know in the comments. And never forget, sometimes heroes don't speak. They simply show up exactly when we need them most.